The morning sky was a patchwork of ominous clouds, and the air was thick with the scent of impending rain. Emily hurried down the slick streets, her coat flapping in the brisk wind as she made her way to the station. Her mind was already racing through the details of her next assignment. A last-minute story about an environmental protest happening in a small coastal town. As a journalist for a large media network, she was used to this kind of life, constantly on the go. Rarely staying in one place long enough to plant roots, she didn't have time to stop and take in the surroundings, barely glancing at the people jostling their way through the station. Her eyes were glued to her phone, fingers flying across the screen as she texted her editor about the change in plans. The rain, which had started as a drizzle, was quickly turning into a downpour, and by the time she reached the platform, Emily was soaked, her hair sticking to her face in damp tendrils. She sighed as she boarded the train, grateful to finally be out of the storm. She found her seat near the window and plopped down, pushing her wet hair behind her ears. The train was packed with other travelers, most of whom were also escaping the relentless rain outside. For Emily, this journey was supposed to be routine. Just another trip to cover a story, another article to write. But the familiar ache in her chest reminded her that something was missing, something beyond the next byline. She had spent the last several years chasing stories, pushing her way to the top of her field, but in doing so, she had let go of the one thing she had once yearned for: connection. Across the aisle, Liam sat in silence, completely unaware of the world around him as he lost himself in the pages of a well-worn book. His dark hair was tousled, and his brow furrowed in concentration as he read, his mind far from the rain-soaked platform they had just left behind. Liam was an engineer, though he never thought of himself as just that. His job was his passion, a way to contribute to the world in a meaningful way, building things that would last long after he was gone. Sustainable energy, eco-friendly buildings, green technologies, those were the things that filled his thoughts most days. But lately, he had been feeling restless, as though something vital was missing from his carefully structured life. He had planned this weekend trip months ago, a getaway with an old friend to the same coastal town Emily was heading to, though for entirely different reasons. His friend had convinced him that it was time to take a break, to step away from the never-ending stream of projects that consumed his waking hours. He hadn't exactly been excited about it, but now that he was on the train, he was beginning to feel the first stirrings of anticipation. Maybe this trip would be the escape he needed. As the train rumbled along the tracks, weaving its way out of the city and into the rolling countryside, the rain outside turned into a torrential storm. Emily glanced up from her phone long enough to watch as the landscape blurred behind streaks of water running down the window. There was something oddly soothing about the rain, despite the chaos it brought. She leaned back in her seat, allowing herself a rare moment of stillness, her mind wandering as the train rocked gently back and forth, but the tranquility didn't last long. Halfway through the journey, an announcement crackled through the overhead speakers, pulling Emily out of her reverie. The conductor's voice was calm but firm, explaining that due to severe weather conditions, the train would be making an unscheduled stop at a rural station until the storm passed. Emily groaned inwardly, her mind immediately racing through the implications of yet another delay. She was already behind schedule, and now this. She tapped furiously on her phone, trying to reach her editor again, her frustration mounting. Liam, on the other hand, took the news in stride. He closed his book, marking his place with a finger, and glanced out the window. The station they had stopped at was small, barely more than a platform in the middle of nowhere. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning illuminating the dark sky in brief flashes. The passengers around him shifted uneasily, murmuring to one another about the delay. Liam, however, felt a strange sense of calm. He had always been good at going with the flow, finding peace in unexpected situations. Perhaps this forced pause was exactly what he needed. Emily, not sharing his sense of calm, fumbled with the lid of her coffee cup, trying to juggle her phone and the steaming cup at the same time. In her haste, she didn't notice when the train jolted slightly, and before she knew it, the coffee had tipped over, spilling across her lap and onto the floor. She gasped, quickly grabbing napkins from her bag, but the damage was done. Her jeans were soaked, and her carefully planned morning was unraveling even further. That was when she noticed him. Liam, who had been watching the whole thing from a few seats away, stood up and made his way over, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He reached into his own bag, pulling out a small stack of napkins, and offered them to her with a quiet chuckle. "Rough day, huh?" he said, his voice warm and friendly. Emily looked up, startled at first, but then she laughed, a genuine, slightly embarrassed laugh. "You could say that," she replied, taking the napkins from him. "Thanks, I didn't mean to make such a mess." Liam shook his head. "Don't worry about it. Looks like we're all stuck here for a while anyway. Might as well make the best of it, right?" As Emily dabbed at the coffee stain on her jeans, she glanced up at Liam, noticing for the first time how kind his eyes were. There was something about his calm, easygoing demeanor that immediately put her at ease. For a moment, the stress of her delayed assignment faded into the background, replaced by a curious sense of relief. And just like that, in the most unlikely of places, something began to shift between them. Emily, still drying the remnants of her spilled coffee, found herself more intrigued by the man who had kindly come to her aid than she had expected. Normally, she was quick to dismiss casual encounters with strangers. Her career had made her too cynical for chance connections. But Liam was different. There was something about his quiet demeanor that felt disarming, and the way he had approached her without expectation or pretense had left an impression. "Do you travel often?" Liam asked, sitting down across from her. He figured they were both stuck, and there wasn't much harm in striking up a conversation. The storm outside had them both grounded for the foreseeable future. "Too often," Emily admitted, folding the damp napkins and placing them on her tray table. "I'm a journalist, so I'm always hopping from one place to another, chasing stories." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "Must be exciting though, always seeing new places and meeting different people." Emily shrugged, glancing out the window as a flash of lightning illuminated the station. "It can be, but sometimes it feels like I'm just passing through life, you know? Never really staying long enough to matter." She bit her lip, not quite sure why she had shared something so personal with a stranger. But there was a vulnerability in the storm outside, the kind that made walls between people feel thinner, more transparent. Liam, sensing the weight behind her words, chose his response carefully. "I get that. I mean, I don't travel as much as you do, but my work keeps me busy. I'm an engineer and I love what I do, but sometimes it feels like I'm building things that outlast me, and yet, I'm not really living in the moment. It's like I'm always working for the future but missing the present." Emily looked at him, surprised by his insight. "Exactly," she said. "I spend all my time telling other people's stories, but I've forgotten how to live my own." The words hung between them, resonating in the quiet hum of the train. The world outside felt far away, as if the storm had created a bubble around them. They fell into an easy rhythm after that, talking about their lives, their work, and the things that kept them up at night. Liam, it turned out, was in town for a much-needed break from a demanding project. His team had just finished designing a series of eco-friendly housing units, and his best friend had convinced him to take a weekend away to recharge. He hadn't wanted to go at first. He was more of a homebody, but now that he was here, he realized he needed the time off more than he had thought. Emily, in contrast, had been sent to cover a protest in the coastal town. It was a small, local movement, advocating for the protection of a natural habitat that was being threatened by new developments. Normally, it wouldn't be her beat, but her editor had insisted. She wasn't thrilled about it, but work was work, and she had a reputation for being thorough, no matter the assignment. "Environmental engineering, huh?" Emily said, leaning forward slightly, intrigued. "So, you're one of the good guys, trying to save the planet?" Liam chuckled, a deep, rich sound that seemed to ease the tension around them. "I try. It's hard, though. The world isn't exactly eager to change, and most of the time, it feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle. But every little bit counts, right?" Emily smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. She found herself enjoying his company more than she expected. There was an earnestness to Liam that was refreshing, a sense of purpose that resonated with her own ideals. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't as different as she had initially thought. As the storm raged on outside, the train's delay stretched from minutes into hours. The passengers grew restless, but Emily and Liam were too engrossed in conversation to care. They shared stories about their childhoods. Emily growing up in the city, always on the move, while Liam had spent his early years in a small town, where life moved at a slower pace. They talked about their careers, their dreams, and even their fears, the kind of honest exchange that only happens when time feels suspended, and there's no rush to get anywhere. By the time the announcement came that the storm was clearing and the train would soon be on its way, Emily realized she wasn't ready for the conversation to end. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had connected with someone on a deeper level, beyond the surface pleasantries and work-related chatter. She glanced at her phone, now forgotten on the seat beside her, and wondered if this was what she had been missing all along: genuine human connection, something she hadn't allowed herself to seek in years. Liam, sensing the shift in her mood, looked out the window at the receding clouds. "Looks like we'll be moving soon." "Yeah," Emily said softly, feeling a pang of disappointment she hadn't expected. "I guess the delay is over." Liam hesitated for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest of his seat. He didn't want to push, but something inside him urged him not to let this moment slip away. "You know," he said carefully, "I don't have any plans tonight. If you're not busy, maybe we could grab a coffee once we get to the town. I could show you around. There are some great spots by the coast." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the offer. She had come to this town for work, nothing more. But now, the idea of spending more time with Liam, of exploring this unfamiliar place with someone who was quickly becoming less of a stranger, was tempting. "I'd like that," she said, smiling. As the train slowly pulled away from the station, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world outside the window ceased to matter. The storm had brought them together, and neither of them could shake the feeling that perhaps this was fate, pushing them towards something they hadn't even known they were looking for. By the time the train pulled into the small coastal town, the storm had passed, leaving behind a sky painted in hues of pale pink and lavender. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting a golden glow over the landscape as Emily and Liam stepped off the train together. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of the sea, and a cool breeze swept through the station, making the ends of Emily's hair flutter. As they walked side by side through the quaint streets of the town, Emily felt a sense of calm wash over her. The town was peaceful, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city. Small cottages lined the streets, their windows glowing warmly in the fading light. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where people waved at strangers and everyone seemed to know one another. They reached a small cafe perched on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the ocean. Its wooden sign swayed gently in the breeze, and the soft sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the air. Liam pushed the door open, and they stepped inside, greeted by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of soft jazz playing in the background. They found a quiet corner near the window, where they could watch the waves roll in as the sky darkened. Liam ordered 2 cups of coffee, and when the barista brought them over, Emily wrapped her hands around the warm mug, savoring the moment. "So," she said, taking a sip, "tell me something about yourself that's not work-related. Something I wouldn't guess just by looking at you." Liam leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Okay, well, here's something. I'm a pretty good cook, but only when it comes to Italian food. I can make a mean pasta." Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Really? I didn't peg you for the chef type," he shrugged. "It's a hobby I picked up in college. My roommate was Italian, and he taught me a few things. It's become my go-to when I need to impress someone." His eyes twinkled with playful mischief. "Well, consider me impressed," Emily said, smiling. "I'm terrible in the kitchen. My idea of cooking is microwaving leftovers." They both laughed, the sound mingling with the soft clink of dishes and the hum of conversation around them. The atmosphere was warm, intimate, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily wasn't thinking about work or deadlines. She was just enjoying the moment, the company, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, something special was beginning here. As the evening wore on, they found themselves lingering at the cafe long after their coffee cups were empty. Conversation flowed effortlessly, and the connection between them deepened with each passing moment. Emily was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Liam, how natural it felt to open up to him. There was no pretense, no need to impress or hide behind the walls she had built over the years. Eventually, the cafe began to close, and they reluctantly made their way back outside. The sky was now a deep indigo, and the moon hung low over the ocean, casting a silver path across the water. Liam glanced at Emily, a question in his eyes. "Want to take a walk along the beach?" he asked, nodding toward the sandy shore below. Emily hesitated for a moment, her rational mind telling her that she should head back to her hotel and prepare for her assignment the next day. But something inside her, something that had been quiet for too long, urged her to say yes. "I'd love to," she said, smiling up at him. They made their way down the narrow path that led to the beach, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft sand beneath them. The beach was nearly deserted, with only the sound of the waves and the distant call of seabirds breaking the stillness. The air was cool and crisp, and Emily wrapped her coat tighter around her as they walked side by side, their pace slow and unhurried. For a while, they walked in comfortable silence, the rhythmic crashing of the waves providing a soothing backdrop. Emily found herself lost in the beauty of the moment, the moonlight shimmering on the water, the feel of the cool sand beneath her feet, and the quiet presence of Liam beside her. Over the next few days, they spent as much time together as possible, exploring the town, sharing meals, talking about everything and nothing. It felt easy, natural, like they had known each other for years rather than just a few days. The protest Emily had come to cover turned out to be a success, and she wrote her article with renewed passion, fueled not only by the cause but by the new energy she felt in her life. Liam, too, found himself more inspired than ever, his mind buzzing with ideas for his next project. On their last evening together before Emily had to return to the city, they sat on the same beach where they had shared their first kiss, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I don't want this to end," Emily admitted, resting her head on Liam's shoulder. "But I also know we both have our lives to get back to." Liam wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Who says it has to end? We don't have to let distance get in the way. We'll figure it out." She smiled, feeling a sense of hope bloom in her chest. "I'd like that." And so, as the sun set on their time in the coastal town, it also rose on a new chapter in their lives. A chapter filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future they would build together, no matter the challenges ahead. Thanks for watching. Please tap that subscribe button to help my YouTube channel grow, and please like and share to your family and friends.